just start with the BBC and start with the man who wrote this truly wonderful article. We say a very good morning to Jack Elsom. How are you, sir?
Good morning, Jeremy. Yes, I'm good, thank you. Probably not as weary as Samir Shah, the head of the BBC, who's got a $1 billion lawsuit on his hands.
Well, I have to say, and this isn't taking aim at anybody, for me, and I think it is a fantastic piece this morning, Donald Trump has basically said, apologise in full by Friday, or I want $1 billion, which is £760 million, which actually the BBC could afford because they get $5.39 billion every year. However, we found out yesterday when we were on air that government sources had lent, we were on with Ryan actually, had lent on the BBC to get rid of Davie and Turness, and they're saying there's open warfare. But to me, I know the Trump thing's really important, but to me, there's a bigger question. And I would hate to think, Jack, and love your thoughts on this, that all the do-gooders and people who justify the BBC will simply say, this is because of Donald Trump. It isn't. It's because of Hugh Edwards, Gary Lineker, Bob Villan, Martine Croxall, the Hamas documentary, the way they treat J.K. Rowling. It's about, in my mind, a national broadcaster that is biased and is not what it's supposed to be. And I think that's a really important point.
I think for the past few years, especially under Tim Davie's watch, the BBC has felt in a state of just perma-crisis, and it has just lurched from one scandal to the next. You've named a few of them there. Now, you know, to misquote Oscar Wilde, one scandal might look like carelessness, but a complete stack of them looks like something systemic. And I do think that there is a almost blind spot when it comes to the BBC leadership, and we saw it yesterday, where there was not even any real contrition or acknowledgement that there might be something institutional here. Now, at least I think it is incumbent on them, and we've seen two of their senior leadership go, it is incumbent on them, I think, to actually address this and probably to launch an investigation to see what is going on under the bonnet of the BBC, because the big mistakes that they make, whether it's eulogising the son of a Hamas minister, whether it's live streaming anti-Semitic chants at Glastonbury, whether it's doctoring footage of Donald Trump, whatever you want to pull up, it does always seem that these mistakes seem to come from a point of view of being liberal, lefty, progressive, anti-right.
Yes.
Now, I just think that, and I will make this point because I know many people at the BBC who take their duty of impartiality incredibly seriously. I've got colleagues who I work with in the political sphere in Westminster who uphold their standards of, I think, non-bias very, very seriously. But clearly, there is something going on at the BBC, and I think that the people that do want to defend the BBC, I think we have to do now is address that there might be a problem, and the worst thing you can do, I think, is by circling the wagons, closing up shop and saying nothing to see here, governor. And one of the problems last week is that when these accusations started dripping out in the Telegraph, we had radio silence from the BBC. And I think now, with this lawsuit on their hands, rather than, again, we saw Samir Shah saying, oh, we're not sure how we're going to respond to him yet, get on the front foot, come out with your response, and, you know, for goodness sake, show a bit of contrition, because, you know, that Panorama documentary was pretty disgraceful.
No, agreed. And I also like the point you made, that it's a bit like the police force when we sit here and we criticise, and we're talking about the very top of the tree. The men and women on the streets are doing a good job and must be frustrated. I'm sure there are plenty of journalists from the BBC, and I'm talking about people on the ground doing a good job. They tell me there could be a White House ban. That'll upset the BBC. But essentially up above, you're right, at board level, the executive level, it is not, I don't care, I'll argue with anybody, it is not unbiased, it is not, in my mind, doing what it says on the tin that a state broadcaster should do. And I think there are far too many examples, and I completely get the Trump thing. I think it's amazing, the article, but I also think it's time for the BBC to look at the different levels. Just a couple of things for you. This was Nigel Farage yesterday, Jack, on my show. Have a listen to what Nigel said.
I'm going to defund the BBC from its current model, be in no doubt about that. The BBC, under our plans, would be slimmed down to something very relatively small, but most of it would move to a subscription model to compete in the open market. You know, do I want it to have a basic role for news and current affairs? Yes, but it's going to have to be very, very different to the way it is now.
Thoughts on that, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, like times have changed, right? You know, when the BBC first came onto the scene, was it 100 years ago?
104 years ago, I think. 104.
104 years ago, it was that ITV. I mean, I think that's basically about it, right? And like now we have such a plurality of media outlets who are forced to pay their way and forced to stand on their own 2 feet in the world. And many people are looking at the BBC, in which if you own a TV, you are forced to fork out £170 a year on pain of fine and if not imprisonment. People just think that actually, you know, it is stuck. Its funding model is stuck in a bygone era. And, you know, this charter review is coming up. And I'm sure that the license fee model will be something that comes under scrutiny because there is a growing chorus, not just in Westminster, but beyond as well, where people aren't watching the BBC as much as they are because there is so much other choice out there. Platforms like Talk, you know, other streaming services if you want entertainment, Netflix, you know, the rest of it. And so for the BBC, it really now, I think, needs to grapple with the fact that it might not have the license fee.
Yeah, it's almost as if, Jack, right? It's almost as if the time has come, not just through their mistakes, but through their output, actually, to be on a level playing field. I mean, I had this bizarre man, John Mayer, on before saying to me, this is outrageous. It's just a one-off mistake. I listed 6 and he agreed with me. But he would say they do tremendous work. And yes, we found out yesterday that 12.2 million people watched the BBC's coverage of the Lionesses winning the World Cup final. Traitors, 12 million. Strictly, 11 million. Fantastic. But you cannot base insisting that people give you £180 a year willy-nilly or you go to prison or get fined on 3 good programmes when your news output does not do what it says, and I keep saying this all morning, on the tin. I believe that the BBC on a level playing field would get subscriptions for Strictly, for Traitors, for the football, for a lot of things. I don't think that they would for news, and that is something that really alienates and annoys people, not just the public, not just those of us who are doing our jobs. You're right, we have to, you're the same with The Sun. If you don't write good stuff, people won't buy the newspapers. That's the way it works. I just feel that the unfairness of the BBC's position in terms of the marketplace has been passed over for years because they have been straight down the line. Now they're not. Everybody's going, why are we paying for this stuff? It's blatantly left-wing. It's blatantly liberal. You know, people know what they're going to get from Talk. They know what they're going to get from the Sun newspaper. They know what they get from the Guardian newspaper. I think they're beginning to know what they get from the BBC, and it certainly isn't bloody balanced, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, you know, I love Traitors. I love Gavin and Stacey. I love Line of Duty, but it's a bit of a non-argument, really, because I could also list off 10 other programmes from Netflix or 10 other programmes from
absolutely.
Apple Prime, you know. So the people that go, the BBC does great stuff, totally agree, but so do all these other platforms. And so, you know, but they're not, but they don't have the luxury of getting guaranteed income to the tune of £5 billion a year. And so, you know, it is that argument now. We need to have a public conversation, really. Coming up to this charter renewal about what do we want the BBC to do? Do we want it to be the current licence fee model? At the moment, that looks very unsustainable. Are we going to move to a more marketplace model? Is there going to be a carve out for news? You know, that is the sort of questions which I think that people are going to have to be asking as this charter renewal comes up. I think it's in 2027. Completely agree.
It's a bit of fun, but I need to ask your opinion. You're the political editor of The Sun. What is the point politically of Ed Davie? I'll let you muse on that while I tell you what Ed Davie, who used to be in charge of the post office, but he doesn't talk about that. This is him on the BBC.
The BBC News is the most trusted news source in the world, and we should be really proud of it. It's typical of British values. Of course, there's the odd mistake they make. I have to say, Donald Trump makes many, many more, as does Nigel Farage. And so the fact that Nigel Farage is basically teaming up with President Trump to criticise the BBC is shocking. It's unpatriotic, it's wrong, and it shows that he wants Trump's America, with his attacks on free media, coming to the UK.
I'm going to let Jack Elsom, the political editor of The Sun, respond to Ed Davie.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, Ed Davie has carved himself out a bit of a niche. I think he sort of finds it his new sort of plaything where he just loves to bash Donald Trump. And he thinks that he is going to win votes in the UK because Starmer is forced to cozy up to Trump. The Tories and Reform both respect him. So he is now the UK's anti-Trump candidate. But in doing so, I think almost risks making himself look a bit silly, because yesterday he came out of the traps very early on and said, we need the BBC to defend our values against people like Nigel Farage. It's like, well, hang on a minute. If the BBC is meant to be impartial, as you just said it is, then surely it needs to treat all parties equally. And there are 30% of people in this country that are currently backing Nigel Farage. 36%. And so I don't really think, well, exactly. So I don't really think that the argument washes very much with Ed Davie, but clearly, you know, he's got his little stick now, which he likes to beat.
I can't take him seriously when he hasn't got a. I can't take him seriously when he hasn't got a red cat sweat. What am I calling it?
Just an important point, Jeremy. The Lib Dems in the last. I'm sorry, I'm on my soapbox now. The Lib Dems in the last Parliament got their biggest ever share of MPs. They got something like 70 MPs. 72 MPs. And for the life of me, I really don't know what they've done with it. You know, people like Reform, even other smaller parties like the SNP, are making more noise in Parliament, and I'm there every single day, than the Liberal Democrats. They try and insert themselves into debates, don't make much noise. But what's happened to all of the...
Can I jump in
what's
and
happened
say...
to social care? What's happened to all the stuff they stood in the election
I
about?
I don't like Zach Polansky's politics, but he's done more for the Green Party in 2 months.
Exactly.
Nigel Farage has got 5 MPs, right? The truth of the matter is that Ed Davie has absolutely no policy, nothing. What he does is he does that sort of activist thing, or he jumps on the bandwagon. He's got Trump and Farage derangement syndrome. It's extraordinary. And if I was Nigel Farage or even Zach Polansky, and I say that through gritted teeth, I would look at how a man that incompetent, lacking any real policies, ended up with 15% of the seats or 20% of the seats. It's extraordinary. It's extraordinary.
Can I make this other point? Because they complain to the BBC the whole time that they give Reform undue coverage. Nigel Farage, and, you know, listen, whatever you think of him, almost every single week will hold a press conference where he puts himself up for questioning by journalists such as myself, and he takes every single question, essentially, from all outlets, be it people from The Sun, be it people from The Guardian. Every single question. I cannot think of the last time Ed Davie held a press conference where he answered questions from the media. I genuinely can't. And if I'm wrong, then correct me. But I cannot think of the last time. And so when he complains that he's not getting enough coverage, I'm thinking, put yourself out there, man. Do something. You know, get some policies. Don't just hitch yourself onto various, causes at the moment.
Completely.
I think they're very good at that. But I think, you know, for them, try and get on the front foot a bit more.
There's no real
give some helpful advice.
You're right. You talk about mistakes. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the Ed Davie thing I was talking about, he was Post Office Minister. A BBC News article last year, in brackets, I don't know if it was edited or not, close brackets, Ed Davie apologises to Alan Bates over poorly judged letter at Post Office inquiry for initially refusing to meet him while serving as Post Office Affairs Minister in 2010. So, if you believe the BBC, he did make an appointment and talk about his time at the Post Office. Politically, one other thing to talk to you about this morning, Rachel Reeves, thieves, whatever. Budget, 26th of November. I think most people have ascertained that there's going to be major income tax or tax increases. Despite the protestations in the manifesto, this wasn't going to happen. This has caused all sorts of people to go, really? You're just no good to your word. Every time I see Rachel Reeves, she looks even more scared on camera, as if the whole thing's rounding in on her. She's hinted now that she will scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Let's just watch this, if we can, Jack, briefly. This is Rachel Reeves, people.
I don't think we can lose sight as well of the costs to our economy in allowing child poverty to go unchecked. And in the end, a child should not be penalised because their parents don't have very much money. Lots and lots of different reasons why families change shape and size over time. And I don't think that it's right that a child is penalised because they are in a bigger family through no fault of their own.
It's interesting, with all this BBC stuff this morning, this has really resonated, Jack. A lot of people saying well, hold on a second, and this is where I think this country is changing. Yes, of course, people should be given the chance to have children if that's what they want, but there surely comes a point after 2 where it is not unfair to say, what's she saying, penalising children into poverty? Well, don't have kids if you can't afford to feed them. The state shouldn't be wiping your backside forever. Yes, help out, give people the chance, but this is going to cause huge anger, mostly, by the way, because she's going to raise taxes, we all know that, while saying to people who want 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kids, and by the way, I pay for all of mine, the state will do it for you. This is a big political contentious thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it goes to show really how politically weak she is and how exposed and vulnerable she is to her Labour backbenchers. I mean, there's the moral argument that always comes with the 2-child benefit cap. Some people say we need to scrap it to get down child poverty. Some people say, I don't want other people paying for my kids, right? If you even park that, the point of this is that in the election, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves consistently said, we cannot scrap the 2-child benefit cap because it's unaffordable, right? Now they're saying, the public finances are so bad that we're going to have to break one of our main manifesto commitments and raise income tax on every single one of you that go to work. But actually, they're good enough that we can spend £3 billion scrapping this thing that we said we weren't going to do. How on earth do you make the two things marry up? On the one hand, the public finances are good enough that we're going to break our manifesto, but they're bad. Sorry, but they're bad enough, but they're good enough so that we can do something we said we weren't going to do. This shows that how I think exposed she is to the rebellious nature of Labour MPs who have seen this as their totemic issue for the past few months. When Keir Starmer went to address the Parliamentary Labour Party last Monday, it was virtually the only thing which Labour MPs said again and again and again. I don't see how they justify putting up income tax on tens of millions of people when they said just 16 months ago in that election, they specifically were not going to do that. Scrapping the 2-child benefit cap, something they said they weren't going to do, they're now looking to do it. And I think that it's that argument which is going to be a really hard sell for Rachel Reeves.
Couldn't agree more, Jack. Really appreciate your time this morning. I know how busy you are. If you haven't got it, go and get the Sun front page from Jack Elsom. Beeb's $1 billion bungle about Donald Trump suing the BBC for $1 billion. Also, as he just said, all about the 2-child cap benefit. He just nailed it there, didn't he? I'm going to raise taxes on you all, says Rachel Reeves. All of you that go to work and struggle to meet your bills. But if you want 3, 4, 5, 6 kids and you're not working and you're struggling, we'll pay for you. Tea.